Hello, everyone. Welcome to TA Tech Live and our RecAd Savvy webcast. We do this show every single month to explore smart recruitment advertising and marketing. And for today's show, we're going to talk about how to build a good, effective, authentic employer brand in an era of cultural clashes, which create a lot of different pressures on employers. And joining me today is one of the smartest people in the business, a person who really knows employer branding. So please join me in welcoming John Graham to the virtual stage. And John, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Shaker Recruitment Marketing, if you would please.
Oh, not a problem. Good morning, and thanks, Peter, for having me. I love the intro. And now I have to live up to it. Hi everyone. I'm John Graham, Vice President of Employer Brand Strategy, Humanity, and Culture at Shaker Recruitment Marketing. Shaker is a full-service recruitment marketing agency spanning from employer brand and EVP development, creative, full-service creative, social martech, anything that drives technology in the recruitment marketing space, as well as analytics. And so we pride ourselves on being partners with our clients who are seeking to engage, retain, attract top talent, and being the marketing engine behind those efforts.
Okay. Well, that's great preparation for our topic today. Obviously, and you know this better than I, employer brands have always been a critical element in successful talent acquisition, but I would posit that in today's fraught environment, they're more important than ever. So let's begin with looking at the context, at the challenge itself. I mean, I've been in HR and talent acquisition for a long time, first as a partner in the Hay Group, then as the founder of TA Tech. And I don't think I've seen a more challenging environment with regard to social pressures and regulatory pressures and so forth than there is today. So, John, do you agree with that? And B, how would you characterize the nature of this environment that we're in?
It's a great question. I would certainly agree that this is a extremely challenging space to brand and market in, as far as the talent market. There's a lot going on globally, domestically, sector wise, technology, media, and perception. So, when it comes to branding for your particular organization, regardless of the sector, you're competing against a lot of noise and a lot of people in your space trying to get the same talent you are, and people in sectors or companies in sectors that aren't in your direct sector competing for the same talent. And brand trust is at an all-time low a lot of times, especially when it comes from corporate narratives, skepticism through social media. So yeah, there's a ton of factors that go into the challenges, but then also just the I think the recruiter cycles or recruitment cycles and talent cycles in general, and where businesses are adjusting not only how much headcount, but where they're getting headcount from globally. AI and technologies impact on those decisions as well. So there's a lot going on right now.
And of course, employers, know that their brand has to be authentic, has to be credible.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's been government pushback on DEI. There's been changes in the way that employers and job seekers go to market, their behaviors online, and so forth. So it is an environment that is really tough to understand and to it would seem to me to create a really effective employer brand. So if this is the context that we're dealing with, it's not business as usual. It's business as unusual. Uh, what would you suggest for an employer? What should be their step one? Is it whether they're creating a brand for their employer for the first time, and there, believe it or not, there are plenty of companies out there that don't have employer brands yet,
Mhm.
or those that are trying to update their brand in a way that is convincing and engaging in today's environment. What would be step one?
So I think there's a couple of ways you can approach that, but what I often recommend is first determine how transparent you want to be, right, about who you are as an organization. And I think when you work backwards from that question, then it requires some examination of what is the narrative that we want to portray or project, but then what's true and what is the balance or the meeting in the middle of that, right? So what we never want to do is develop a brand or a campaign or an approach where the marketing does not reflect reality, right? That's what we call bait and switch. so so you don't want to attract talent on false pretenses, right? Sharing champagne and roses about your culture that just won't stand up to their lived experience once they become employees. And so starting with how transparent do you want to be, that then also requires you to be comfortable with the examination of the flaws currently within the culture. What are the challenges in terms of retention of talent? Why is talent leaving? And then what are those aspects of our culture that we're working on that we can incorporate into it? So, you know, that's part of a bigger conversation, but this all comes to the fore through a significant effort of research and defining and developing an employee value proposition to understand who exactly you are through the lens and the lived experiences of your employees, and then marrying that to what the executive leadership's perspective and perception of their culture and where the business is heading, and sort of marrying those things together to now develop a brand out of.
So mechanically, is that
Mhm.
done through uh, group sessions? Is it done a survey? Is it done with some combination of the two? How does a
Mhm.
company tap into what is, to use your term, the lived experience of their employees? It's interesting to me as an old HR person how hard it is to really understand what day to day what workers are experiencing on a day to day basis, and what they internalize as part of the culture and what they don't.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it is a combination of the two. It's an and rather than either or. So it's qualitative interviews. It's data gathering through spending time with employees, listening, examining some of the quantitative and collecting quantitative data. So leveraging existing employee uh, employee sentiment reports or engagement reports and surveys that have been done. And then ultimately cross-referencing all of that with what are the mission, vision, and values? How are those showing up? What is leadership's vision and current perception? So we do a lot of interviews with the C-suite as well, and you tend to find some disconnects, right? So the executive experience often differs from those on the front line or even in the middle. Um, and there's some reckoning with, or some reconciling with that frontline experience, which by and large is the vast majority of your organization. And what do they experience day to day? Do the mission, vision, and values really drive home with them? If not, why not? And then we're bringing those messages or those key themes through of what really does pull you, what drove you to hit the apply button, why are you here 10 years later, your first year in, does everything that attracted you really resonate still? Is it, resoundingly true still? And then even looking at what are those things that shape your day-to-day lived experience, which by and large is your relationship with your direct manager and or your colleagues. So we're looking at all of those things and finding those through lines and those threads that no matter who we speak to at any seniority level or any function or any geography, that really come glaringly through as markers of your core and cultural DNA.
So you mentioned a little earlier that some of the things that you are going to find in this research are areas that you need to remediate. No organization is perfect. So how do you balance the fact that vision for the organization is not the lived experience, yet you want to convey that vision, at least in part, in your employer brand? How do you reconcile those two things?
That's a really good question. So there's often a divergence between sort of this, vision or mission statement that was written, well before the time we're doing this brand work. So um, when you start to hear stories and testimonials and experiences from existing employees or even alumni, you can easily tell, right, whether that mission or that vision is clear and present in the day to day. When there is a disconnect, our work sort of stops at the identification of the challenge or the issue or the problem, and really, we lean more into, okay, well, what can you lean into and what can you stand on, that is reflective of the real experience, and where there's gaps between what you perceive the experience to be and what you'd like it to be. What are those aspirational moments or messaging? We can leave the door open for that, but we also want to leave door open for the story of bringing people in to help get to those stated visions and missions and ideals, right? And then it really becomes about showcasing the work that's being done, which is why it's critical to get beyond a TA centric employer brand, because it's not just about recruitment, right? An employer brand touches every employee, regardless of seniority level or job function. So when you can see uh, that this is not just about filling recs, this is about really that brand narrative that people are going to carry either as an ambassador or a detractor, and being able to shape that narrative so that ideally you're bringing on more amplifiers and ambassadors of that brand work than detractors.
How how much has the process of creating a cohesive brand been complicated by the fact that we now live in a global workplace? So you don't really have, in many cases, one organizational culture. You have one in the States, you may have one in Europe, one in Africa, one in South America. And
Right.
also, you have people working at home, so they are living a very different kind of cultural experience. How do you reconcile all
I was gonna say you have different cultures from floor to floor in the same building,
that?
right?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So no, that's an excellent point. I mean, the goal of the employer brand, I'll even stop at the employee value proposition. The goal of the employee value proposition is not to identify each of those pockets of culture and their different variations. You really want to find the through lines that bring a cohesive umbrella story about the experience at the organization. And then, as you've defined your EVP, your brand is built around that aesthetically and narratively that brings those proof points through to whatever audience. Then it's time to shape it, tailor it, localize it for whatever function or geography you're trying to engage. So we do a lot of localization for global organizations who are ramping up operations in India right now, which is huge for any company that has a significant tech function. And so you might have an already developed employer brand that came out of, New York or Wisconsin, but you need to hire 350 full stack engineers in Bangalore. Well, you have to find those threads that remain the core of your identity as an organizational culture, and then you have to work with folks on the ground, in the culture, in the locales where your brand is being deployed, and then fit that brand for purpose, because word for word translation often doesn't work. There might be some flexibility in how that brand essence is communicated, but it certainly remains true to the core of who you are. So yeah, it's a lot of um, adaptation, molding the brand, but not doing so in a way where it changes who you are just to fit whatever room you're in. More so, be who you are, but do so in a way that resonates in the rooms you're in.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Please,
can you
yeah.
give me an example of what kind of thread could weave through all these disparate places and organizations, and
Mhm.
be a constant, recognizing that, as you say, you've got to take the constants and then sort of tailor them or at least form fit them into each local culture,
Yeah.
organizational culture. So what kind of what is a thread like that that has that kind of enduring ability?
Yeah, so it could be anything from let's imagine you're a tech company. I'll go with tech, and maybe the core theme there is that we are passionate about innovation. Let's just say that, which seems pretty cookie cutter and could apply to any company, but maybe that really resonates with your employees, and we see that signal strongly in all of our data, whether it be your engagement surveys or focus group interviews, that people really feel driven and passionate about innovation at this company. Well, that can apply globally. How do you say it? Who's saying it? What it looks like? What environment it's being said in? That's what you can work with, right? And that's what becomes malleable to suit the cultures or the continents you're trying to engage with.
It sounds like there's a touch of aspiration as well as reality in these threads. Is that
Oh
correct?
yeah, there has to be. Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. Every company in every sector has jobs that are ubiquitous, right? So you could do this work at any company, right? The question is, why would you want to do this work at this company right now, right? Versus the myriad competitors that you could go to and do and express the same skill set. And so, yeah, I think you have to be aspirational in the sense that there's something to reach for, to be a part of something that you're helping to build or grow or stabilize, and find ways in which to leave the door open. But again, aspiration can't be the basis of your brand work, right? It has to be rooted in reality, so as to give people a clear expectation of not only what they're going to experience, but also ensure that once they get there, that it does deliver on that. Because if not, people tend to drive attrition rates up when they get in, when companies sell you a dream and then you get in there and it's nothing like that. In fact, it's worse. And now you're actually working against the brand efforts, because when we don't have great experiences, by and large, we tell people, right? Whether it's people in your close network, people you don't even know, right? And now you're working against the negative narrative perceptions of people who had bad experiences because what they were sold was not what was delivered.
So let's. You talked earlier about making sure that the C-suite was involved in this research, and that makes all the sense in the world.
Mhm.
I think in today's environment, um, the C-suite um, is in many cases, not in every case to be sure, but in many cases, very sensitive to governmental pressures, and not running afoul of. not only explicit regulations, but just the perception on the part of government officials that they are not playing by the approved rule book. And I say that euphemistically, obviously. So, how do you get this C-suite that's under these pressures to really buy into the fact that uh, the organization has this real culture, and whether they like it or not, that's what you have to go with. How do you get from here to there?
Mm. Well, our first recommendation always is to be in lockstep with your corporate brand and marketing teams internally, right? So our clients have very robust organizations who are certainly in charge and in control of what narratives are going out about the organization. And we partner very closely with them. When it comes to the employer brand, our main focus is really the culture, right? It's really the people who are having an existing experience as talent within the organization and connecting that to people who might be entertaining the idea of joining. So when we talk about the external pressures that the C-suite faces, when it comes to how their organizational work internally, let's say it's culture, and the big one in the news this year has been DE&I, which has been in pretty tough position as a function. Um, you have to walk the balance, and we've seen our clients walk the balance between um, being clear about what their commitments are to their people, what their stance is as an organization, and what their ethos is when it comes to matters of social justice or equity and equality, diversity and inclusion, and so forth. But that cannot get around what the legal requirements are for you as an organization, and those obligations, and whatever those obligations are. So it's comms, it's marketing, but it's also legal. So, for instance, for an organization that is a government contractor and has been impacted by or significantly faces significant impact due to funding because of their DE&I programs. We've seen everything from people completely scrubbing their career sites of their DEI commitments and pages and so forth, to pulling ads and removing social posts in celebration of Cultural Heritage Month. So we've seen that reaction. We've also seen clients who decided to stand 10 toes down on their decision and their position on their commitments and have not budged. So I think it comes down to what what is the guidance from their internal legal, what is the risk, obviously, for maintaining position versus shifting, and then also, one that I would love to see calculated more is what is the impact going to be on that brand perception by existing employees and potential, right? Which we've seen a significant backlash for some brands who've rolled back or altogether removed their DE&I programs, and what that's done to their public perception, not only from an employee perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. So there's a lot that goes into that. What I say is really, again, follow your legal advice first and foremost, follow your comms advice. And if you have the opportunity, I don't believe there's any legality or any legal risk, I'll say, me not being a lawyer, but I have not seen it yet, of you showcasing your culture as it exists. No, all of these companies have diverse cultures, right? And are still continuing to hire people from various communities and identities. Um, what's changing and what we're navigating is how you talk about that, but showcasing your actual culture. There's been no legal precedent to say you can't do that, right? And Title VII, Civil Rights Act protections of protected class identities is still the law of the land, so that has not gone away.
Any thoughts on JP Morgan's shift from DEI to DOI, and the focus on opportunity? Is that sort of uh, just sort of rearranging the deck chairs, or is that really something substantial?
Yeah, it's the latest in the rebranding, the great great rebranding of DE and I. I mean, whether you drop the E, whether you move the D, change it to B, like we're still talking about the same things. This is again effective wordsmithing to avoid some legal pressures. But yeah, opportunity, equity, interchangeable in my mind. And they're not the first ones to do it, right? A lot of companies have dropped diversity, now are focused on inclusion or
Right.
culture or belonging, or so it's by and large, what I'll say is, for most of the organizations that we work with, whatever is being expressed externally, uh, by and large, internally, nothing has changed. Right. So, this is where you get into what do you have to do to remain in good standing in certain rooms, in certain circles, for certain administrations, versus what is our commitment to our people and what are we doubling down on? And like I said, I'm not seeing too much internal change from prior.
Uh, I'm sure that Shaker has. I mean, it's been around a long time, so it has a well-honed process for helping organizations work on their employer brand. Have you had to modify that process in any way because of this fraught environment that we're in?
I I don't necessarily know that it's an environmentally driven as far as any change. I think if anything, we evolve. Excuse me. We've evolved our approaches based on the demands and the needs of our clients. So it's the beauty is because we've been around, be 75 years. Um, that we've seen a lot of change. We've seen a lot of market cycles, talent cycles, administrations, and yet and still here we are. And I think we pride ourselves on being, not just ahead of the curve, but defining the curve and a lot of these things, helping our clients navigate those curves and what's possible or what's coming. And for their businesses and their sectors that are, they have specific or unique needs, we adapt. Um, but that also helps that we are consultative, rather than, just trying to sell you something, right? So
Right.
so being a partner really is like, well, okay, well, here's the challenge that you're dealing with, with whatever the external, internal, economic pressure is. What are your goals and objectives? What do you absolutely need to achieve, whether it be from talent attraction, engagement, or retention, culture, so be it. And then how can we approach this elegantly, effectively, and accurately, to position you for success for those goals and work backwards from that? That still remains our approach. So I think that helps us weather a lot of those storms.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our program. John,
Oh, wow.
any last minute advice or suggestions you want to leave our viewers with before we sign off?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a couple. Obviously, visit shaker.com for more. We'd love to have the conversation. But look, employer branding as a function is evolving fast. And I'd say, for the organizations that are going to win in this space and really showcase the impact of what they're doing is understanding a couple of things. One, employer brand and recruitment marketing, same cul-de-sac, different houses, right? So the outcomes and the impacts or the measurements of success for both employer brand and recruitment marketing are different. And unfortunately, the terms get thrown around synonymously, when there is a very distinct difference. So I think the ones who are winning are understanding, hey, if I'm trying to fill 90 recs, employer brand isn't the solution for that. It is a complement and a part of recruitment marketing efforts and who you engage with in TA and how that works. is going to be critical. The brand space, and we're starting to see a lot more connectivity to internal marketing, internal comms, and their understanding and embrace of employer brand. Finally, it's been a long time. We're still not there, but we're getting there. That is going to help significantly as well, because as more or as many functions that are responsible for how the brand voice comes through, regardless of the audience, the better, when employer brand is part of those conversations and these other functions understand what employer branding does. So I think that, and lastly, I'll just say, be clear on how transparent you want to be. Right. The reality is people are going to find out who you are as an organization beyond what you tell them that you are, right? So they're going to more sources than just your career site and your social media. They're talking to the people who live it every day. So you can either lean into that and get ahead of it and manage and be a steward of that, or you can be responsive and reactive to whatever the narrative is that's being shaped.
I think that's such great advice. You mentioned earlier you want to stay in sync with the consumer brand of the organization. And
Absolutely.
consumer brands have to understand that they can say all they want about what the company stands for with regard to its products and services, but at the end of the day, there are millions of perceptions of that employment brand, or excuse me, that consumer brand going on. And the same is going to be true with with your employer brand. You've got to have that brand be authentic and engaging, but at the same time, in today's world, there are multiple vectors into which people can get a view of the organization. And if you aren't being credible, if you aren't being authentic, to your point, you aren't being transparent, then it'll be quickly seen by the great population.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, well, thank you for that. So you mentioned come to shaker.com. If
Yes.
folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all day, every day. So certainly, if you just type in John Graham Creative, I'll pop up. And always happy to connect. I have a link in there if you want to book time just to talk about anything you've seen here, or shoot the breeze on employer brand and recruitment marketing.
Great. Well, John, thank you very much for your time today. I certainly learned a lot, and I suspect all of our viewers did as well. Thank you to all of you for joining us, joining John and me on the program today. Our next show will be with a person who's been in our industry for a very long time, Jeff Taylor, the founder of Monster. Is going to talk about his early days at monster.com and what he's doing with his new company, Boom Band Arena. That's coming up the end of the month, so please come back and join us for that show as well. You can register for it at tatech.org/TATech Live. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. John, thank you again. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for
Bye bye
having me.
now.